Hello, and welcome to Survey of Art History 2. We're continuing our discussion on Baroque art, and tonight we're going to focus on Baroque sculpture. So before we go into the images and slides, I thought it might be a nice to get into some of the terms specific to sculpture. Essentially, sculpture is a three-dimensional object. It takes up a volume in space, and you can achieve this art object through a variety of ways. There can be subtractive sculpture, where you carve away material. It can be additive sculpture, where you model clay. That's an example of additive sculpture. Or it can be assembled together, or assemblage, constructed to fit together. It can also be found objects. What we're going to focus on tonight will be mostly subtractive sculpture. This other term, in the round, this is going to be important because we're looking at Baroque sculpture, and you remember some of the design characteristics are movement. So essentially the viewer will have to move around the sculpture. So it's freestanding, in the round sculpture that we're going to look at tonight. Other terms. To speak about positive space, it might be important to talk about negative space. The negative space is to find area around the positive space. For example, the positive space is the artwork. It's the physical part of the art piece in sculpture. The negative space, it's what is not the sculpture. For example, if I stand this way, the sculpture, the positive space is my body. The negative space is this area here. Okay? Texture. Essentially, texture is talked about when we talk about sculpture. There is also texture involved in painting, but almost always we're talking about sculpture. It's the surface quality of the object. It can be rough texture, it can be smooth, it can be ultra polished, or a combination of all those. And we already talked about subtractive sculpture. So these would be terms that you would use when you talk about sculpture, and the terms you would use for your paper, because you're going to do a formal analysis and comparison. Remember that. Just a reminder of the Baroque style. There is a sense of capturing emotion in a theatrical kind of way, and we're going to see movement, and it's going to engage the viewer. Sculpture. Some of the design characteristics that we're going to look at. This is a review. The sculpture is going to capture that sense of emotion in a theatrical way, and we're going to see movement in that sculpture, and it's going to engage the viewer. As a reminder, and part of a review of the Baroque style, remember, in your book, you probably read about the Council of Trent. This is the council held by the Roman Catholic Church. They were trying to decide whether the church was going to use icons in their art. The argument went, if we use icons, it may lead into idolatry. The other argument will be, well, there's a lot of parishioners that do not know how to read. So essentially, they're illustrating the Bible for us in art. So for the Baroque style, the idea was to do it in a more emotional way to get people excited about coming back to the church. This is the Contra-Reformation that we're talking about. Just as a reminder and a review. Now let's look at the images. Gian Lorenzo Bernini. This is somebody not new to us. We've already seen his architecture. He is also a painter. You may have seen his self-portrait in the book. He also is a playwright. So he's kind of one of those people who are just really well-rounded. And he is probably, arguably, the best sculptor we've seen. This particular piece, Apollo and Daphne, let's get into the subject matter first. Mythological subject matter. In the narrative, Apollo falls in love with Daphne. Daphne doesn't want to do anything with him. There is a chase or a pursuit, and it's quite excessive. And if you guys have read mythology before, you understand that there's several versions of stories that are slightly different. So I'm just giving you the paraphrased version of it. In one version, Daphne prays to Aphrodite, and another one she prays to her father to essentially stop this chase. The prayer is answered, and she becomes a laurel tree. You can see in this particular image the area where the bark is growing. Also, you see her fingertips are turning into leaves. Now I'm going to show you other angles of this as well. See if I can clear this. I'll just use the... Okay, here we go. Oh. There we go. Let's go back. There we go. There we go. There we go. Here's a detail. As you can see, there is the exciting part of the story being captured here. It is that moment of transformation. This is one of those characteristics of Baroque. It's illustrating the more exciting part of the narrative. She doesn't look happy. Notice the use of negative space in this piece. This is pretty amazing work. This is one single piece of marble. And to kind of do this where he's standing on one foot and with his arm stretched out. Also with the flowing robe. It's pretty impressive. I have another view here so you can see it. This is the back view so you can see how energetic this piece is. Let me show you the possible inspiration for this piece. This is the Apollo Belvedere. This is in the Vatican. This is a Roman copy of a Greek original. So you can see the robe. You can also look at the facial features. So you can see where he possibly got that inspiration from.